Johannesburg's 9th mayor since 2016 has resigned. What does Kabelo Gwamanda's resignation mean for the city, for the country, and for the political landscape? Let's find out. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, the Mpofu-Walsh experience. I'm Mpofu-Walsh, and if you're new around here on this channel, we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis. Welcome back aboard. Well, there's a lot going on in our country right now, but today I want to highlight the resignation of Johannesburg's 9th mayor since 2016, Mr. Kabelo Gwamanda. Now, Mr. Gwamanda just resigned today as I record this episode. At a recent public event, he was seen in high and defiant spirits. Take a look at him over here at the funeral of EFF councillor Moshe Mphahlele. More about his untimely death in another episode, because I think we need to focus on that worrying trend. But take a look at Gwamanda here a few days before his resignation.
They thought they were impenetrable, these ones. Actually, they say for the city of Johannesburg to be where it is right now. We were fighting for the employees in the city of Johannesburg that were perished. Because they are anti-workers, these people. They call me incompetent. They call me incompetent because I refuse to have tea with their white friends. I'm just incompetent. Let them come. Councillor Mphahlele was a giant.
Cool. So what we're going to do in today's episode is have a look at Gwamanda's resignation letter in detail and then think through the political implications and ramifications of his resignation. So let's have a look at this letter, which is produced, interestingly, not from him, but from the office of the executive mayor. And it kind of has a third-person feel to it, which I find interesting. But let's begin with what the letter says. Now, it's titled, Mayor Gwamanda Resigns from Office. The executive mayor of Johannesburg, Councillor Kabelo Gwamanda, has today submitted his resignation to the Speaker of the Johannesburg Metropolitan Council. Now, we get to some interesting parts in the subsequent paragraphs. This is still the background. This in line, the letter continues, with the political engagements that have taken place over the past weeks and which have been largely informed by the new political architecture of governance in the country following the 29th of May 2024 national and provincial elections. Now, let's take a step back there, because this speaks of the new political architecture of governance in the country, which suggests that things that are happening at the national level since the 2024 election are beginning to cascade down to the provincial and local level, and people have been watching Joburg to see if there are changes in these important metropolitan municipalities. And Joburg suggests that the answer is yes and no, but we're going to get into that in a bit more detail. But it's interesting that this letter notes that the national picture is the reason for this resignation. Now we get some quotes from Gwamanda himself. As the youngest mayor of Johannesburg, I am humbled by the opportunity to have led the city and to have stabilized it financially and administratively following the collapse of the multi-party coalition government. Now let's take a step back there. Okay, Gwamanda was the youngest mayor, and he certainly rose to power in an unorthodox way. But to have suggested that the city has been stabilized financially and administratively is just not true, unfortunately. Now, that doesn't mean that Gwamanda himself is responsible for Joburg's malaise, because quite frankly, multiple administrations stretching right back to effectively the turn of democracy even before then have failed to get a grip on Joburg. So all the blame doesn't lie with Gwamanda for Joburg's crisis, but to say that the crisis has been stabilized is far from the truth. The fact of the matter is that Joburg's finances are in a worrying position. We recently just heard news of massive debts that City Power owes to Eskom. There was a court case recently where Joburg tried to counterclaim against that debt unsuccessfully, and Joburg basically owes Eskom money. We know that City Power itself has been straining under load reduction, and the city has simply failed and been unable to stabilize the power supply. And also we know that there have been big water crises with water shedding going along with load reduction, and in times residents of Joburg haven't had water and electricity at the same time over this administration. Now, the finances of Joburg were given an unqualified audit, and that has happened before, even in the time of Amos Masondo. So there's nothing unprecedented in terms of governance that has happened. But again, it's also unfair to blame the entire crisis on Gwamanda. So, of course, when you're leaving, I suppose you want to state what your legacy is, but the residents of Joburg probably don't have the same perspective, unfortunately, as the Gwamanda administration. He continues, "I am pleased that we managed to place good governance on course and that we achieved the best audit outcomes witnessed by the city in years." I've reflected on that. The thing too, though, is that audit outcomes are one thing, and an unqualified audit. I think only 2 other big municipalities got better and clean audits when the Auditor General presented to Parliament in 2023 September. But simply having an unqualified audit or even a clean audit is one thing, but that just shows that there haven't been accounting irregularities or reporting irregularities or misspending or the misreporting of spending. But the true test of any local government is delivery to the citizens. And there we have seen some problems. For example, the Lillian Ngoyi Street. Remember there was that explosion about a year ago in July 2023? Those repairs still haven't happened. I believe there's a 2-year timeline to fix one street. I understand that the damage was serious and severe, but hey man, in other countries, like, things get fixed quickly. Power stations get built in a matter of months. Where are we in Joburg waiting for one street to be fixed in 2 years, and goodness knows the budget? So in terms of the lived reality of citizens of Joburg, I'm afraid this administration wasn't able to turn the ship around. Maybe the ship was already shipwrecked, and we can have that conversation.
Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below.
But governments get judged by whether they can change people's lives. And I'm not convinced this government was able to do that. But more on the new government later. Let's get back to the letter. I shall continue to serve the people of Johannesburg as a councillor. So Gwamanda is going back to being a councillor, which is a good and a noble move, and will forever cherish the experience afforded to me in my tenure as executive mayor. My story is one I am hopeful will continue to inspire many an African child from our city that against deprivation, isolation, social and political exclusion, and with the absence of friends and peers in the corporate and media hierarchy, one can live and rise on the noble cause of changing the conditions of the poor, said Mayor Gwamanda. The resignation will be effective from a date to be determined by the Speaker, wherein a new executive mayor will be elected by the council. Look, I think it's true that when anyone rises from a difficult background, from a young age, when they're not expected to be mayor of a city, that's something to celebrate. But that in and of itself is not the celebration. The celebration would be really changing the fortunes of the city. And so while Gwamanda may have inspired many who follow after him, the true test would have been if he was able to do something dramatically different with the city. And given where the city is, where it was, and what he inherited, he was not able to do that. But sure, I'm sure he can feel proud of himself, and his family feels proud of him, I'm sure, for having, risen to such high office. And I hope he has a successful future career in South African politics, and it's good. Many politicians resign, and he's going back to his position as a councillor, and he'll rebuild from there. So that's the letter. Now let's take a look back and a step back and have a look at the way that Gwamanda's mayoral committee was composed, because it's quite interesting. In actual fact, I think of about 10 MMCs. Most of them were ANC MMCs. Now, an MMC is like one of the executives, like a cabinet member at local government. So you had finance, you had, key other infrastructural portfolios in ANC hands. And there were only 3 other councillors from other parties in the leadership. Obviously, Gwamanda was one, right at the top as mayor. Then you had Mqini Chwaku of the EFF, who took over the safety and security portfolio. And we interviewed him soon after he took over that portfolio. Have a look at that interview. And then we have Kenny Kunene of the Patriotic Alliance, who is taking over transport, or who took over transport. So we have an ANC-led government in Joburg, except for the fact that there are 3, and of course the mayor were from different parties. But here's the worrying thing about the next stage. Because Gwamanda, as the figurehead of this coalition, is leaving, people feel like there will be significant change. But as far as I can understand, reading the tea leaves of what ANC provincial chairperson Secretary TK Ngiza said, this is going to be a continuation, but just a different mayor. And in fact, the candidate who the ANC is going to put forward, who is currently the MMC of Finance and once was the mayor, Dada Morero, he's already in the MMC portfolio. And I've spoken about Joburg's financial woes right now. Well, the person who is the head of finance might just become the mayor. So the idea that this is going to create some kind of massive executive change and we're going to see different leadership is actually belied by the facts on the ground. We're going to see a cosmetic change on the top, but probably many of the names, or certainly the party that has been at the center of Joburg in this coalition, but also for most of Joburg's history into democracy, except basically since between 2016 and around 2018, is still going to be in power. And therefore, Gwamanda and removing Gwamanda may make people feel nice and give the illusion of a changeover of power. But I'm not so convinced that we will actually see a true changeover. What we will now see is the ANC in office and in power and in the mayorship. So this is going to be a coup, another coup for the ANC, by the way. And as I have repeatedly stated, the ANC lost the election, but it won the negotiations. The ANC got 39% in this election, 39.7%, and yet it's retained the presidency. The ANC has retained the deputy presidency. The ANC has retained the speakership. The ANC has retained key ministries from DIRCO to finance to defense. The ANC has retained virtually all of Gauteng from a minority government. The ANC has not suffered any significant losses. Opposition parties in its coalition have contented themselves with crumbs, and now the ANC will rise to the mayorship of Joburg. If that is not a turnaround, I don't know what is. It's not a turnaround that voters asked for because they stripped the ANC of power, but I have to hand it to the ANC's negotiators. What they have done from 39% remains undefeated. And somehow they have outsmarted all opposition parties and secured nearly as much power from 39 as they had at 57. So having said that, what are some of the deeper political questions which arise from Gwamanda's resignation? Let's go into the deeper party politics and maybe even the national and provincial pictures. The first is this an example of the GNU, as many like to call it? Hashtag, it's not a GNU. But anyway, I'll continue to say it for as long as people don't realize it. Will the GNU cascade its policies and proposals down to local level? I don't think so. At least what's happening in Joburg is not necessarily a mirror image of the national GNU. Why do I say that? First, we have to look at the provincial picture in Gauteng. Gauteng, remember, where Joburg is located, is the only province where the Gauteng ANC broke with the national ANC and rejected a partnership with the DA. So what we're going to see in Joburg is not an ANC, DA, IFP plus coalition, but we're actually going to see a kind of anti-GNU coalition. But the fascinating thing is that the ANC is still at the center of both the anti and the pro-GNU coalition. I don't know, South Africa. That's how South Africa works, I guess. So the Gauteng ANC is pairing or partnering up with the unlikeliest of allies, Herman Mashaba's Action SA. Now, Mashaba once vowed that he would never, ever work with the ANC, that the ANC was the problem that had created all the crises in South Africa. But he had a change of heart. And I actually interviewed him recently on this channel, and I want you to take a look at this because I asked him specifically about Joburg and why he had this change of heart. Take a look at this clip of me having a chat with Mr. Mashaba. Sure.
We're concerned about the stability, more especially in Johannesburg and Kuruleni. The stability because EFF and ANC cannot see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And that puts this metros at a very serious risk. Sure. You look at Johannesburg, the mayor that they've put in place because the ANC and EFF had to find a compromise, but unfortunately subjected us, the residents, with the wrong person. So during my consultation with the teams, something just really clicked to me to say, you know what, Herman, as much as you are angry with the ANC, please don't allow your own personal feelings to destroy this country, more especially this metros, because this is a hard economic hub of our country. And I said, let me listen, and I then decided, let me put my own personal agenda behind me and so forth.
So as you can see, Action SA had a change of heart. They have also found themselves on the outskirts of the GNU. And so they are trying to find ways of finding relevance, but also ways of trying to find stability within Joburg. Now, what it means is that Action SA will not necessarily be part, as far as what Mashaba has already said, of the executive in Joburg. So they won't be like a mayor or MMC of finance, but they will go into leading the council and the legislature, so the speaker and any committees, and then the ANC will rely on them to pass budgets and vote with them in the council. But it'll still be interesting to see exactly how this new MMC situation pans out. Will the ANC keep the EFF on board and create a different kind of alliance? Or will we see other GNU partners being able to worm their way into a new coalition? Or will it simply be an ANC Action SA +1? I think they only need the IFP. So we could see a completely different configuration in Joburg. It'll be fascinating to check that out. But clearly what's happening in Joburg is slightly different to what's happening provincially and nationally, and we have these different coalitions combining. And now remember, for the ANC leadership race, Panyaza Lesufi has been a name that has been bandied about as a potential successor to President Cyril Ramaphosa, and he could be someone who could lead the anti-GNU charge. He could lead those figures in the ANC who say that partnering with the DA is partnering with a mortal enemy and a step way too far that goes against the ANC's history. And he could lead the charge within the ANC, within the alliance, to say, we are going to bring back the old ANC, the true ANC. And if Lesufi is able to demonstrate that he has created a coalition in Gauteng and in places like Joburg, which continue to keep the ANC at the center, but partner with different kinds of parties like Action SA or the EFF, then he might have a claim to be the alternative to the Ramaphosa administration. So that's definitely one thing to look at. Another just deeper question to look at is that,
fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it.
Joburg is broken. And Joburg has been broken for a long time. I know my friends in the ANC often hearken back to the days of Parkstyle and romanticize the ANC's wonderful golden era in Joburg. Joburg hasn't had a golden era. Crime has always been a terrible scourge in Joburg. Joburg's finances have always been underwater for as long as I've been sentient. Joburg's infrastructure, particularly in the inner city, yes, there was an attempt at a revival, but it has never been the city that it could be. Inequality in Joburg, spatial inequality, water, electricity, sanitation, the spread of informal settlements. Joburg has never been able to be as great as it should be. And this may be a sugar rush, but I'm still quite concerned that the structural problems here in Joburg, the crime rates, the electricity infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the municipal finances are a dramatic problem. And unfortunately, the same party that brought us that problem over decades, not years, is now back in power. So the ANC has a choice. They can do the impossible and the miraculous and fix their mess, in which case I'll be the first to congratulate. Or if they don't fix it this time, they will slide further and further behind in Gauteng, where they're already at 33% or so. And the 2026 election is going to be a really, really tough time. So just like it's do or die for the ANC nationally, and we've seen unemployment creeping up again today, it's do or die for the ANC in Joburg, because they may have somehow rescued victory from the jaws of defeat, but this time, this is the real last chance. So, we've had a look today in our episode at Kabelo Gwamanda's resignation, his letter, and what it means for the political landscape, but also delved a little deeper into the coalition government nationally, provincial dynamics in Gauteng, and what we can expect going forward in this city that has so much promise, but has disappointed so many of its residents. Can Joburg become its true self one day? I truly hope so, but we have a long way to go before we get there. Thank you for watching SMWX. Help us get to our next milestone of 150,000 subscribers. Thank you for an amazing week of viewership last week. And share this with a friend, share this with a family member, share this on your WhatsApp group, and help grow the SMWX family. If you have watched this video to the end, you are a proud member of that family, and I'll see you on the next one. Aye.